three characteristics in the Buddha's path to liberation. For the Buddha teaches only dukkha and the way to the end of dukkha. So all of his teachings in some way fit into his path to liberation. Now the Buddha holds that the way to deliverance, the way to the end of dukkha, lies through understanding the real nature of our existence. We remain tied to dukkha, to the round of becoming, to suffering, because of our craving, our clinging and attachments. The clinging and attachments continue to operate because our minds are covered over by ignorance and deluded by false conceptions, by the perversion. We cling to the body and mind because we see them as permanent, pleasurable, and as self. We interpret them as mine, but I truly am myself. From these erroneous notions, all sorts of defilements arise. Greed arises as the drive to acquisition. We want to grab hold of more pleasure, more power, higher status. We want to expand the territory of our supposed self, to appropriate things and make them mine. We want to go on becoming in the future, to preserve our individuality, to become immortal. This deluded idea of self also gives birth to anger and hatred towards what opposes ourself. It causes the arising of selfishness, jealousy, pride, vanity, competitiveness, the lust for power, and so forth. All arise out of the notion of selfhood. At the deepest level, the ideas of permanence, pleasure, and selfhood sustain the round of samsara. The wheel of birth and death turns because of our ignorance, because our minds are attracted by the lure of some kind of lasting happiness to be found within the world, or by the quest to find some identity for our self-concept. We run from one experience to another, from one life to another, seeking pleasure, seeking security, seeking confirmation of our sense of selfhood. But this is somewhat like a donkey hitched to a cart, chasing a carrot the driver has dangling in front of him. The donkey pursues the carrot with all of its might, but no matter how fast it runs, it never gets any closer to the carrot. But still it goes on and on, pulling the cart forward. Finally, when the donkey gets tired of chasing the carrot, it stops running. It sits down and relaxes. In the same way, when we get tired of running in pursuit of the objects of our desire, or of trying to substantiate our sense of selfhood, then we turn away and go to seek the way to liberation. In that way to liberation, the Buddha points out, lies precisely in the realization of the three marks of existence: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and selflessness. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. By turning the focus of our mental eye inward upon our own experience and looking at our experience with insight, we learn to see these three marks stamped on all the phenomena of body and mind, on all the five aggregates. And this leads to an end of identification. We stop identifying ourselves with the five aggregates. We see them as not mine, not I, not self. Whatever form and consciousness, whatever form there might be, whatever feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness there might be, we stop identifying with them. Then, by realizing the selflessness of all these phenomena, we turn away from them, we become detached, and with detachment there comes liberation. This is what the Buddha says in his second discourse on the mark of not self. He says that the meditator, the monk, sees the five aggregates: form, feelings, perceptions, the mental formations, and consciousness, as impermanent, subject to suffering, and is not self. And when he sees them thus, then he becomes disenchanted with them. He turns away from them. When he turns away from them, he becomes dispassionate towards them. And when he becomes dispassionate towards them, then he becomes liberated from them. And when he is liberated, there arises the knowledge of liberation. He knows destroyed is the round of rebirths. The holy life has been lived. Whatever had to be done has been done, and there is no further becoming to be unbegun. That is the end of dukkha, the goal of the teaching.